I remember the day I moved in with Michael and his parents. It was a sunny morning in June, the kind that held promises of new beginnings. Michael and I had been dating for a year, and everything about our relationship felt right. We were young, in love, and ready to start a new chapter together. The move was significant for me. Leaving my small hometown and moving 5 hours away to live with Michael was a leap of faith. My parents were supportive but cautious, reminding me to always keep my independence in mind. Michael had asked for their blessing, which they gave after many heart-to-heart conversations. His parents' house was a cozy 2-story building with a welcoming porch and a well-tended garden. The first time I visited, I was struck by its warmth. Michael's parents, Linda and Robert, greeted me with open arms. Linda was a petite woman with a smile that lit up the room, and Robert was a tall, jovial man who could make anyone laugh within minutes of meeting him. I felt a connection with them instantly. During those early visits, Linda and I would spend hours chatting in the kitchen, baking cookies, or preparing dinner. She had a way of making everything seem effortless, and I admired her for that. Robert was equally engaging, always ready with a story or a joke, making sure everyone around him was having a good time. Moving in felt like the natural next step. Michael and I talked about it for months, and when the day finally came, it was exciting. My stuff fit into the room Michael and I shared, and his parents made sure I felt welcome. Linda hugged me tightly, saying, "Welcome to the family, dear." The first few weeks were like living in a dream. I was getting along great with Michael's parents. We had family dinners every night, where we shared stories and laughed over Robert's jokes. Linda would sometimes whisper advice about handling Michael's quirks, and I found her insights invaluable. I noticed how they all worked as a unit, and I did my best to fit into their rhythm. I helped with chores, trying not to step on anyone's toes. Michael seemed happy, and seeing him in his element, surrounded by his family, made me love him even more. However, as weeks turned into months, the initial excitement started to wane. I began noticing little things, subtle shifts in behavior that I hadn't picked up on before. It was nothing major at first, just a sense of something being slightly off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt a change in the air, a tension that hadn't been there before. I shrugged it off initially, attributing it to the adjustment phase of living together. But as more time passed, these small changes began to form a pattern, one that I couldn't ignore for long. It was the beginning of what would become a challenging journey, one that would test my strength, my relationship, and my understanding of what it means to be part of a family. As autumn set in, the warmth of the summer months seemed to fade, not just outside, but within the walls of the house as well. The subtle changes I had noticed earlier were becoming more pronounced, more frequent. It was as if a different side of Linda and Robert was slowly revealing itself, one I hadn't seen before. One evening, I was in the kitchen, washing dishes after dinner. It was something I had done many times before, but this time something was different. I had stepped away for a moment, leaving a couple of my dishes in the sink. When I returned, I found that Linda had washed everything else but had left my dishes untouched, set aside as if they were somehow separate, unclean. At first, I thought it might have been an oversight, but it happened again, and then again. It wasn't just the dishes. It was little things, like Linda moving my belongings to a corner of the room, or Robert making offhand comments about my job or my habits. It was never anything overtly hostile, but it stung all the same. I tried to talk to Michael about it to see if he had noticed anything. His response was always the same, a shrug and a quick, "That's just how they are, they don't mean anything by it." But I wasn't convinced. It felt personal, intentional. One incident in particular left a deep mark. It was a simple, casual cruelty, the kind that slices through you because it comes when your guard is down. I was serving Michael his dinner when Linda, with a pointed look, asked, "You're eating again?" Her tone was light, almost joking, but the implication was clear. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and shame. I had always been self-conscious about my weight, a fact that Linda knew. Her comment hit me hard, and from that day on I started skipping meals, eating only when I was sure I was alone. The joy I once found in cooking and sharing meals with the family vanished, replaced by anxiety and a deepening sense of isolation. Michael didn't notice, or if he did, he never said anything. It felt as though I was becoming invisible in my own home, my presence tolerated rather than welcomed. The relationship I had thought so fondly of with Linda and Robert was crumbling, and I couldn't understand why. I started spending more time in our room, away from the family. The house, once a symbol of a new chapter in my life with Michael, now felt like a trap, confining and cold. I felt alone, misunderstood, and increasingly unwanted. I clung to the belief that this was just a phase, that things would get better with time. But deep down, I knew that something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer just Michael's girlfriend. I was an outsider, living under the same roof but feeling miles apart. The growing tension in the house was like a silent storm, brewing beneath the surface, waiting to break. And as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, that storm would soon find its voice in ways I could never have anticipated. Winter arrived with its short days and long, cold nights, mirroring the growing chill inside the house. The unease I felt around Linda was now compounded by a new, more unsettling problem: Robert's behavior. Robert, once the jovial storyteller, began showing a side of himself that was far less amiable, especially after he'd had a few drinks. His humor, which I once found endearing, turned biting and cruel. He'd make offhand remarks about people's appearances, often focusing on their weight, and laugh it off as though it were all in good fun. But the laughter never reached his eyes. One evening, his comments became personal. He made a joke about my weight in front of Michael and his friends. I excused myself quickly, holding back tears until I was safely in the bathroom. Michael came to check on me later, brushing off his father's words as just Dad being Dad. But it was more than that. It was humiliation, served coldly and publicly. The incident that truly shook me happened when Michael was out of town for work. I was taking a shower, lost in thought, when I heard the bathroom door handle jiggle. I had locked the door, a habit I had formed since moving in. Through the frosted glass, I saw Robert's silhouette. He knocked, his voice slurred, asking if I needed help. I replied sharply that I was fine, but my heart was racing. The thought of what might have happened if I hadn't locked the door sent shivers down my spine. I confronted Michael about it when he returned, but he seemed unable to grasp the severity of the situation. He assured me it was a misunderstanding, that his dad probably just didn't realize I was in the shower. But I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability, the sense that I wasn't safe in my own home. Amidst all this, I continued to help Linda and Robert with their needs. I assisted Linda with her medical paperwork, drove her to appointments 2 hours away, and even missed classes to be there for her. For Robert, I helped with their immigration papers, communicating with lawyers and organizing documents. I poured myself into these tasks, hoping to bridge the growing gap between us. But my efforts seemed to go unnoticed, or worse, unappreciated. The more I did, the more I felt like I was being used, a means to an end rather than a valued member of the family. It was a stark contrast to the early days of baking cookies and sharing laughs. Now every smile felt forced, every conversation strained. I confided in Michael about how I felt, but his reactions only added to my distress. He accused me of being ungrateful, of not understanding the sacrifices his parents had made for him. He called me a spoiled brat for complaining about people who had done so much for him. I felt increasingly isolated, not just from his parents, but from Michael as well. The man I moved 5 hours to be with, the man I loved, seemed to be on a completely different page. I began to question everything about our relationship, about the decision to move in with his family, about who I was in this dynamic. I was stuck in a home that no longer felt like home, with people who saw me as an outsider and a partner who didn't seem to see me at all. The feeling of going crazy, of not being able to trust my own feelings, was overwhelming. I was lost, struggling to find my footing in a place where I once thought I'd stand firm. The tension in the house had reached a palpable level, like a thick fog that refused to lift. I knew I couldn't continue living this way, walking on eggshells, feeling unwelcome in my own home. It was time for a direct conversation with Michael, one where I laid out everything that had been weighing on me. I chose a quiet evening, when Michael and I were alone in our room, to broach the subject. My heart pounded as I started to speak, my words laced with a mix of frustration and desperation. I told him about the growing distance with his parents, the hurtful comments, the incidents that made me feel unsafe, and how his reactions only added to my feelings of isolation. Michael listened, but his expression grew increasingly defensive. When I finished, he let out a long sigh and shook his head. "Anna, you're overthinking things. My parents are good people. They've been through a lot. You just need to try harder to understand them." His words felt like a slap. Try harder? I had been bending over backward to fit into his family, to be helpful, understanding, and patient. But it was never enough. And now, instead of support, I was met with accusations of overreacting. The argument that followed was heated and painful. Michael accused me of being ungrateful, of not appreciating the roof over my head and the efforts his parents had made to welcome me. He said I was acting like a spoiled brat, creating problems where there were none. I tried to explain how his words hurt me, how they made me feel alone and unsupported. But the more I spoke, the more he seemed to withdraw, his words turning colder, more dismissive. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling a chasm growing between Michael and me. The man I loved, the man I had moved cities for, was telling me that my feelings, my experiences, were invalid. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, questioning my own perceptions and judgments. The following days were a blur of tension and awkward silences. Michael and I were like strangers, passing each other in the house without a word. His parents seemed oblivious to the storm brewing, or perhaps they chose to ignore it. I began to wonder if I was indeed the problem. Was I being too sensitive? Was I expecting too much? These questions haunted me, eroding my confidence and sense of self. I felt trapped, not just in the house, but in my own mind, doubting everything I thought I knew. But amidst the turmoil, a small voice inside me whispered that this wasn't right. I couldn't be the only one at fault here. The treatment I received, the lack of support from Michael, the feeling of being an outsider in my own home, these were not figments of my imagination. The more I reflected, the clearer it became. I needed to find a way out of this cycle of doubt and unhappiness. I needed to reclaim my sense of self, to find my voice again. But the path to doing so was murky and fraught with uncertainty. I was standing at a crossroads with each direction leading into the unknown. As winter gave way to the early signs of spring, the internal storm I was weathering showed no signs of subsiding. The house felt colder than ever, a stark contrast to the blooming world outside. Inside, I was battling a turmoil that seemed to grow with each passing day. I spent long hours in our room, alone with my thoughts, reflecting on everything that had happened. My relationship with Michael, once the source of so much joy and hope, now felt like a maze of confusion and pain. I loved him, but that love was entangled in a web of resentment, misunderstanding, and deep emotional disconnect. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had changed since moving in with Michael and his parents. I had always prided myself on being strong, independent, and confident. But now I found myself questioning my every move, doubting my every thought. The vibrant, self-assured woman I once was seemed like a distant memory. I also reflected on the sacrifices I had made. Moving 5 hours away from my family had been a significant step, one I had taken out of love and trust. But now I felt isolated, not just from my family but from the person I used to be. My world had shrunk to the confines of this house, and with it my sense of self. My conversations with Michael had become sparse and functional. The warmth we once shared replaced by a cautious politeness. It was as if we were both treading on thin ice, afraid that any wrong step could shatter the fragile surface under our feet. In moments of solitude, I found myself yearning for the comfort of my family. I missed the easy laughter, the unconditional support, the feeling of being understood and accepted for who I was. I missed being able to share my thoughts without fear of judgment or dismissal. The realization hit me hard. I was losing myself in this relationship, in this house. The Anna that moved in months ago was not the Anna I saw in the mirror now. I had become a shadow, a version of myself that was unfamiliar and unsettling. The question of what to do next weighed heavily on my mind. Leaving seemed like the obvious solution, but it wasn't that simple. There were financial considerations, the fear of being alone, and the daunting prospect of starting over. But staying meant continuing to live in an environment that was slowly eroding my sense of self-worth and happiness. I sought counsel from friends and even considered therapy. Each conversation brought new perspectives, but the decision ultimately was mine to make. It was clear that something had to change. I couldn't continue living in a state of perpetual unhappiness and self-doubt. As spring turned into summer, the decision crystallized in my mind. I needed to find my independence again, to reclaim the life I had before, a life where I felt strong, valued, and happy. The journey ahead would be challenging, but the first step, as always, is the hardest. As the summer sun brought warmth and light, I knew it was time to make some decisions. The resolve to change my situation had been growing, and now it was time to act. I started by seeking advice and support outside the walls of the house that had become my prison. Talking to friends was a balm for my weary soul. They listened, offered empathy, and reminded me of the person I used to be. Their words were like a mirror, reflecting a version of myself I had almost forgotten. It was during these conversations that I realized the importance of having a support system, people who saw me for who I truly was. I also sought professional help. The therapist I met with provided a safe space to unravel my thoughts and feelings. It was through these sessions that I began to understand the depth of the impact my living situation had on me. I was not crazy or overly sensitive. I was reacting to a genuinely challenging environment. Armed with this newfound clarity, I started exploring my options. I began saving money, cutting down on unnecessary expenses, and looking for affordable places I could move into. The idea of living on my own was daunting, but it also filled me with a sense of excitement and freedom. It was a tangible goal, a light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. The most challenging part was confronting Michael about our relationship. I chose a quiet evening when we were both calm and rested to have the conversation. I explained my feelings, my need for independence, and how our current living situation was affecting me. I told him that I was considering moving out, not to end our relationship, but to save it. Michael's reaction was mixed. He seemed to understand on some level why I felt the way I did. But there was also a sense of hurt, a feeling of being abandoned. We talked for hours, navigating our way through a maze of emotions and fears. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in months. Despite the pain and the uncertainty, there was a sense of relief in having everything out in the open. We agreed to give each other some space to think about what we both wanted from the relationship and our lives. The weeks that followed were a time of introspection and planning. I continued to save money, research apartments, and mentally prepare myself for the possibility of a new beginning. The decision to move out was not an easy one, but it felt right. It was a step towards reclaiming my independence, my sense of self. Through it all, I held on to the hope that Michael and I could find a way to navigate this new phase of our relationship. But I also knew that no matter what happened between us, I needed to be true to myself, to live a life where I felt respected, valued, and happy. The decision to move out was like turning the page to a new chapter in my life. It was a step filled with uncertainty, but also with a sense of empowerment. I had finally taken control of my situation, making a choice that prioritized my well-being. As I started packing my things, I felt a mix of emotions. There was sadness in leaving a place I had once hoped would be a long-term home, and in the strain it had placed on my relationship with Michael. But there was also a growing sense of excitement and liberation. I was about to embark on a journey of self-discovery, to rebuild the life I wanted on my own terms. The day I moved out, Michael helped me with my bags. Our goodbye was bittersweet. We promised to keep in touch, to try and work on our relationship from a new perspective. But there was also an unspoken understanding that things might never be the same again. That was a reality we both had to accept. Moving into my new apartment, a small but cozy space, was a breath of fresh air. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The walls of my new home were blank canvases, waiting for me to fill them with my own story, my own identity. In the weeks that followed, I focused on myself. I reconnected with hobbies and interests I had neglected, spent more time with friends and family, and continued my therapy sessions. Each day was a step towards healing, towards rebuilding the confidence and self-assuredness I had lost. My relationship with Michael evolved in unexpected ways. With the distance between us, we began to see each other and our relationship more clearly. We had deep, meaningful conversations about our needs and expectations. Sometimes they were difficult and emotional, but they were always honest. In this newfound space, I rediscovered parts of myself that I had lost. I rekindled my love for painting, a passion I had set aside in the chaos of the past months. I started a small freelance project, combining my artistic skills with a newfound sense of entrepreneurial spirit. It was a small step, but it filled me with a sense of purpose and joy. As summer turned to autumn, I looked back at the journey I had been on. It was a path marked by challenges, self-doubt, and pain, but also by growth, resilience, and self-discovery. I had learned the hard way that sometimes, to find your place in the world, you have to be willing to leave the comfort of what you know. My story with Michael was still being written. Whether we would find our way back to each other or forge separate paths, only time would tell. But one thing was clear: I was no longer the person who had moved into his parents' house all those months ago. I was stronger, wiser, and more in tune with who I was and what I wanted from life. And for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely excited about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead. I had found my path forward, and I was ready to see where it would lead.
Amy, thanks for taking care of my daughter for the past month. I'll come to pick her up tomorrow. What are you talking about? Patty, who had been traveling for a month, was still at the airport. I could hear the flight transfer announcements over the phone. Unlike my calm reply, she started to panic. Oh no. What are you saying? She must be there, right? I left Mia in your apartment's garage. Mia is her daughter, hence my niece. I haven't seen her. When are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I sent you a message, so you should know. I haven't received any messages. No, that's impossible. Patty, now in panic, screamed over the phone. What are you going to do about this? I left Mia in your care. You have to take responsibility if something happens. After hanging up once, Patty tried calling Mia's child-friendly smartphone but couldn't connect, and continued to panic. She called me back hurriedly, screaming even more, so I suggested she might as well go home. Oh, that's right. That's a good idea. After hanging up, she headed home quickly, but there she found Victor, Mia, and me together. Patty looked puzzled, her mouth opening and closing as if she wanted to ask why the three of us were together. Patty, I've heard everything from these two. What? At Victor's words, she was shocked and turned pale. My name is Amy Baker. Until a few years ago, I worked for a company. At 40, I became independent and started working as a freelance illustrator. My income has increased, and now I live alone in an apartment. My job is primarily home-based, and I only leave the house occasionally for shopping or meetings with clients. I'm not married and don't have a partner, but I'm satisfied with my life. Friends sometimes ask if I'm lonely, but I've never thought about it. I'm more fulfilled by my work and don't plan to look for a partner. I am a bit worried about my old age, but when the time comes, I'll think about it, which sometimes surprises me with my own optimism. Today, after finishing a deadline for an illustration, I took a break at 3 p.m. and looked at the calendar. Then I realized that my brother Victor's birthday was coming up soon. Victor, 5 years older than me, works as a salesperson for a major publishing company, and often lives away from family for quite a long time to work for a specific project. Occasionally, he brings back souvenirs from his workplace. Last month, he dropped by my place unexpectedly and brought some cookies as a souvenir. I invited Victor inside, made coffee, and we ate the cookies together. You should buy more for Patty and Mia instead of me. But I need to see your face from time to time. I wouldn't want you to have collapsed or something. That protective, considerate nature is what has always been one of Victor's good traits. Patty and Mia are his wife and daughter, making them my sister-in-law and niece, respectively. I haven't told Victor, but I find Patty a bit difficult. She's very outgoing. Always dressed fashionably with trendy nails and clothes, giving off a glamorous vibe. That's not a bad thing in itself, and I don't really mind. But she often seems to look down on me for being single. During a family gathering on Christmas, when she found out I didn't have a partner or a spouse, she laughed out loud. Amy, are you the type who thinks you can put off marriage? Because you believe you're still young and beautiful? Do you know about the right time to marry? Well, I think marriage and relationships are personal values. I don't think it's necessary to have a partner. As I responded, Patty laughed again. What was so funny, I couldn't tell, maybe it was the alcohol. But she kept teasing me about the same thing, which was exhausting. When choosing my apartment, one of my absolute criteria was to be far from my brother's place, mainly because of Patty. However, I got along well with my niece Mia. She's turning 10 this year and apparently goes to school carrying a cute light blue backpack. I haven't seen her in it, but she told me about it when she visited my place. Amy, you draw so well. Mia was watching me work on my illustrations and was fascinated by the pictures on the computer screen. I want to draw too. Oh, wanna try? Really? Sure, I have plenty of time before the deadline, you can try drawing a bit. Mia sat in front of the computer, excitedly moving the pen. What she drew then was her light blue backpack. She mentioned that it was heavy because she has a tablet inside. In the summer, the water bottle makes it even heavier. Yet despite being so small, Mia handles it admirably. According to Mia, while Victor is away on business, leaving his home, Patty spends her time as she pleases. She buys ready-made meals from stores or supermarkets for dinner or lunches when school is off. I usually do the laundry, and sometimes Mom does it. Really?
Yeah.
Also, she gets really angry if there's mud on my shoes after gym class. Why? What does your mom do at home? She's always just watching her smartphone or TV. Mia often stays in her room or heads out to the park or library to avoid upsetting her mom. Hearing this makes me feel that it's not the best parenting, but I hesitate to comment as an outsider. On another occasion, when our family gathered, I saw Patty scolding the quiet Mia harshly over something minor like spilling tea or something. It seemed like something that could simply be wiped up with a cloth. And I thought it unnecessary for her to get so angry. Mom is scary, and she gets angry no matter what I say, so I can't say anything. I couldn't quite forget that Mia's quiet comment as she left. That day after drawing her light blue backpack. It was a sunny weekend day when Patty, going on a day trip with her mom friends, had dropped Mia off. I never imagined that a few days later, a similar message would appear on my smartphone. The autumn leaves in the local park had turned completely, and the chilly weather made me miss the sunshine. When I returned to my apartment after running some errands, I saw the silhouette of a little girl standing alone by the parking area. She was wearing a light blue backpack and her face was half hidden by a mask, but I recognized her. Mia? When I called out, her anxious eyes looked up at me. It was indeed Mia. What are you doing here alone? And what's with that bag? Next to her was a small carry-on suitcase, making it look like she had run away from home. Mom said to go to your house, Amy. Seeing the question marks above my head, Mia pointed to my bag and muttered. On your cell phone. Could there possibly be a message on the smartphone? I quickly pulled out my smartphone from my bag, and indeed, there was a recent message from Patty. Sorry for the sudden notice, Amy. I'm going on a trip with a friend for a month starting today. Please take care of my daughter. As I finished reading, an exclamation of confusion escaped my lips, but I quickly closed my mouth. Of course, it was out of bewilderment, but first, I decided to bring the understandably confused Mia inside. Once we were inside and she took off her mask, Mia's cheeks were as red as apples, and her hands were very cold. I made her some hot cocoa and offered her some snacks while I listened to her story. Mia was drawing on her notebook in her room just a while ago. Patty barged into her room without knocking, handed her the carry-on suitcase, and said, "Mia, you're going to Amy's house now, so get ready. Mom won't be home for a month, so take your backpack too, okay?" "Understood." Okay." Thus, Mia hastily packed her notebook, pencil case, textbooks, and tablet into her backpack while Patty was on the phone, sounding very excited. "Really? That's great. Hey, you're already drinking? That's too fast." Patty's voice was high-pitched and filled the house. Laughter different from the usual motherly tone floated down from the stairs, and Mia had to cover her ears. Once the phone call ended, Patty's voice returned to normal. And then Mia was left at that place with her luggage. "Mom said to be good because I'm staying with Amy for a month. And told to wait there under the chilly sky. Despite the sunshine, it was quite cold. I was getting angry thinking about what Patty would have done if Mia had gotten sick. But does my brother, I mean, your father, know about this? I don't think so. Mom doesn't really talk to Dad much." Mia said this while munching on chocolate cookies. Seeing cookie crumbs on her cheeks was endearing. But I felt it was wrong not to tell my brother about the situation, so I decided to call him later. "Amy, I don't want to be with Mom anymore." Suddenly, Mia said this while staring at the rim of her juice glass. The girl who had been happily eating cookies now looked burdened beyond her 10 years. "Why?" "Because Mom gets angry quickly, she throws things like the trash can, and it's scary." "She throws the trash can?" "I haven't done anything wrong, but she throws it, saying, 'Get out of the way.' Or, 'Go away.' My teachers don't believe me either. I hate it." Tears fell from her eyes, and she cried profusely. I stroked her back and waited for her to calm down, offering tissues. It was clear that what was happening to her was not normal. Convinced of this, I decided to call Victor to see if he could come back. I left her side for a while, planning my words and thinking of a solution as I fiddled with my smartphone. "Okay, this might work." I murmured softly and dialed my brother's number. "What? Mia?" Yes. "What's going on?" As I explained the situation, Victor sounded quite shaken, his voice trembling slightly. Initially, he tried to joke, saying things like, "Is this some kind of joke?" But as I continued, he seemed to believe me and listened attentively. Then, when I shared my plan with him, Victor agreed and said he would adjust his work and vacation to help out. "Okay, thanks. Rest assured, I'll take care of Mia." I hung up the phone, then went back to my smartphone to delete Patty's message from my inbox. I glanced towards the living room, wondering if Mia had calmed down, and slowly walked back in. Tonight, I decided to splurge a little and treat her to something delicious. As I thought this, I slowly made my way back, step by step. Mia's school is a bit far from here, but I explained the situation to the school, and they arranged for her to take the bus. This should make carrying her heavy tablet and backpack a bit easier. I decided to bill Victor later for the bus fare, while I continued my usual work from home during the day. Mia isn't enrolled in any after-school activities, so she comes home and does her homework after school. "Amy, Can you check this for me? I was surprised since I thought teachers did that, but according to Mia, it was different. All my classmates have their moms do it. I used to do it by myself. As I realized how self-centered Patty had been, I picked up a red pen. After checking the worksheet, it was time to prepare dinner. As I stood in the kitchen, Mia followed me and implied with her eyes that she wanted to help. We're making hamburgers today. Can you start by peeling the onions? Yes. Mia peeled the onions faster than I expected and quickly followed my cooking instructions. I wondered where she had learned to cook so well, but before I could ask, the meal was ready. Time flew by as these days repeated themselves, and before I knew it, a month had passed. While looking at the calendar and thinking it was about time, sure enough, I received a call from Patty on my smartphone. Amy, thanks for taking care of my daughter this past month. I'll come to pick her up tomorrow. What are you talking about? I replied calmly. Patty, who had been traveling for a month, was still at the airport. As I could hear the flight transfer announcements over the phone. Oh, come on, what are you saying? She must be there, right? I left Mia at your apartment complex, so you must know. I haven't seen her. When are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I sent you a message, so you should know. I haven't received any messages. Are you sure you didn't get the wrong person? No, that's impossible. Patty, apparently panicking, screamed over the phone. What are you going to do about this? I left Mia with you. If something happens, you're responsible. I'm calling Mia too. She yelled sharply and abruptly hung up the phone. After a while, she called again, still shouting as she continued to panic. It seems she tried calling Mia's child-friendly smartphone, but couldn't get through and continued to panic. Patty, why don't you go home and calm down first? That's true. Good idea, I'm going home. After that, I could hear Patty arguing with another man in the background. But they were too far away to be understood clearly. The silence that followed was like the calm before the storm. Eventually, when Patty returned home, she stormed down the hallway with heavy footsteps. When she opened the door and entered the living room, her face, which was like a demon's from her messy hair, suddenly turned pale with shock. In the living room were Victor, Mia, and me. Patty seemed to want to ask why all three of us were together, but was so surprised that she couldn't speak. Patty, I've heard everything from these two. And your phone call just now. What? I put the phone on speaker mode so everyone could hear. It'll make it easier to talk about what comes next. It was only natural that Mia's smartphone was off, so it wouldn't connect. How could you do that? That should be my line. You said you didn't know earlier. But I've been taking care of Mia here for a month. How can you just leave and go on a trip, leaving her at someone's house? But I sent you a message. That's not the point. Then Victor carefully chose his words and spoke quietly. Both of you, calm down. Mia is here too. Patty, so it's true you went on a trip by yourself and left Mia behind. Your appearance and luggage look like you've just returned. Patty was dressed in a warm coat and seemed dressed up for a trip. Her luggage was full, perhaps filled with souvenirs and clothes. She didn't deny it but started making excuses. Yes, I did go on a trip. Because, you know, even a housewife needs a break. Doing laundry and cooking every day, it's repetitive and stressful. Just let me have this time with my friends. Are these friends, the ones you're referring to in these emails? I showed her several sheets of copy paper. They contained emails between Patty and a person who seemed to be her affair partner, discussing plans for a trip. The emails weren't just recent but had started around the beginning of last spring. And on the day I only took care of Mia for one day. Patty had gone to see gardens with this person. The day trip with mom friends was a complete lie. Patty, realizing she had been caught, covered her mouth as if to say oops. In fact, a few hours before Patty arrived here, at Mia's request, I had searched through Patty's computer and found these emails. Mia had seen her mother frequently looking at her smartphone and messaging someone, and eventually began to suspect that the person wasn't her father. Her suspicions were confirmed when she saw the name of an unknown man on her mother's smartphone messages, while her mother was asleep in the living room. The voice on the phone wasn't her father's either. Mia had told me 6 months ago that her mother was having an affair. I was skeptical until Patty suddenly announced a month ago that she was going on a trip. But after checking the computer just now, it turned out Mia's intuition was correct. Looking over at Victor, I noticed him quietly, yet visibly shaking. What have you done, really? I trusted you, and you just leave Mia with Amy and go off on a trip to cheat? Victor approached Patty with trembling fists. No, it's a misunderstanding. I was told to go on the trip, I had no choice. What do you mean, no choice? You left this house empty for a month for that reason? Say something that makes sense. I was being threatened. Believe me, Mia, you believe me, right? Mia was suddenly asked to respond, but she answered calmly and plainly. Mom, you were on the phone before you left and you sounded so happy. Plus, you made me do all the cooking and cleaning, and you just slept all day. Mia glared at Patty, seizing the moment. And you told me not to stay up late and to go to bed early. But you would go out at night and not come back until morning and then sleep on the floor. What you said was all messed up. Hearing this, Victor pressed her further. Going out at night, you mean you were out partying? No, that's not it. Mia, just be quiet. I quickly showed Victor a photo on my smartphone. It showed Patty dressed up and leaving the house late at night. This was taken several months ago. Mia contacted me, and I happened to be nearby and took it. I was surprised too. Where were you going at that time of night, Patty? Faced with the photo, Patty seemed to give up trying to escape the truth and just collapsed right there. I can't believe it. I can't leave Mia with you anymore. Let's get a divorce. I'll also ask for compensation for negligence. You can go and be happy with that other man. Victor said that much and then turned his back on Patty. Divorce? Are you kidding? Don't you think it's sad for Mia to not have her mother? What about Mia? Help me, please. No. Absolutely not. Amy is more like a mother to me. It was embarrassing as an adult to see her beg her child like that. But Mia dismissed Patty outright. During the time Mia stayed with me, I made sure to spend quality time with her, talking about school, hobbies, and her future plans. Of course, cooking together was also one of those activities. Don't worry, Patty. I'll make sure Mia is happy, I said with a smile, and Patty just slumped down, saying nothing more. 6 months later, her divorce from Victor was finalized, and custody was granted to Victor. Patty was taken back to her parents' home in her hometown. The man Patty had met online disappeared as soon as he found out she was divorced, and all communication ceased. By the time Patty realized she had been played, she was left with a large amount of compensation and child support to pay. Her savings were insufficient, and she had to ask her parents to cover more than half of it. Consequently, her parents kept a much closer watch on her, and she could no longer go out late at night. Furthermore, because she divorced and returned to her hometown without taking her daughter, rumors spread, and she was often looked at negatively when she went out during the day. so she seldom left the house. Still, she would eventually need to re-enter society. But what happens after that is unknown to me, Victor, and Mia. Victor and Mia decided to rent out their old house and now live on a different floor in the same apartment building as me. The rental income is intended to help with the mortgage payments and Mia's savings. I started visiting them almost daily. Victor, who had been on many business trips and neglected his family, decided to change jobs after reflecting on his focus on work over family. Changing careers in his 40s was challenging, but his excellent sales records and communication skills meant he could have been in management. So he received job offers from 2 or 3 companies within 6 months and started working at one of them. I was surprised to learn about Victor's capabilities, as I didn't know he was that skilled. At his previous company, he preferred being a field salesman and had gently declined promotions. I just didn't think it would be interesting to stay on the same company floor all the time. Is that really why? But your new job is fully remote, right? Yes, but it allows me to talk with many different people, which I find interesting. And most importantly, it means I can be with Mia. Mia is still carrying her light blue backpack to school every day. The move resulted in a change of school districts, necessitating Mia to transfer schools. It must have been sad for her to say goodbye to her friends and teachers. But Mia seems surprisingly resilient and is actually enjoying her new school life. Mia, have you gotten used to your new school yet? While we were cooking dinner together, Mia giggled.
Yeah.
I made a friend in the class next door. Already? That was fast. Mia nodded shyly.
Yeah.
We're going to make hamburgers at her house next time. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Seeing her smile brightly made me smile too. Mia dreams of opening a Western-style restaurant one day. Despite being only 10 years old, she has a firm dream, and she shared her reason with me. My friend, like me, doesn't have a mom who cooks, so she makes her own meals. She said she wants to cook for people who don't have anyone to make meals for them, just like us. Is that so? I want to be able to do that too. So, I'm practicing making hamburgers. Her innocent laughter momentarily filled me with a profound, indescribable emotion. But I quickly smiled and responded. That's great, Mia. Your hamburgers are delicious. I hope lots of people get to try them.
Hee.
Seeing Mia facing forward so bravely and shining so brightly, I felt confident that her dreams would not just be fantasy. I eagerly await the day Mia grows up and opens her own restaurant.
Failed the medical school entrance exam? You're utterly useless. But quiet. If you can't become a doctor, you're worthless. Get out. My family ruthlessly disowned me after I failed my university entrance exams. They forced me to sign a document stating never to contact them again, and kicked me out of the house. Why must I endure such treatment? I've always tried my hardest, always being compared to my excellent sister. I can't take it anymore. But a ray of hope shone for me. My life was about to change drastically, thanks to my aunt. My name is Nicole Morris, and I am 18 years old. I should be enjoying my final year of high school, but I don't have that luxury. I'm buried in studying day and night, aiming for medical school. In our family, my father is a doctor and my mother a nurse. My sister, Lucy, passed the medical school entrance exam last year. Our medical professional parents always told us, you too will go to medical school. Lucy has always been clever and excelled academically. She was always at the top of her class and great at sports.
Plus, she knew how to make our parents happy, so they adored her. Lucy would belittle me, perhaps as her way of relieving stress. She threw hurtful words at me as I struggled with my studies. "Hey, Nicole. Heard you did poorly on your mock exam again?" Lucy. It was AB. AB at this time? You're doomed. You won't pass the medical school entrance exam with that. I don't really want to pass that badly. What are you talking about? There's no point in living in this house if you can't pass medical school. If you fail, you can't stay here. With that threat, Lucy sneered disgustingly. Her expression was chillingly creepy. Living in this house. Do I really have to live the life our parents dictate? I have dreams of my own. Yes, I've always dreamed of becoming an illustrator. I love drawing, and every compliment on my artwork from others made that dream grow. I wanted to study at an art school with a design program. But being born in this family, I didn't have the right to choose that path. Even though I harbored rebellious thoughts, I couldn't voice them. Because if I did, I wouldn't be able to live in this house. My father's word was law. Just last night, I overheard my parents talking in their bedroom. Nicole will pass the medical school entrance exam, right? I'm not sure. Unlike Lucy, she's a disappointment. How can two sisters be so different? I was so sure Lucy would pass. Well, Lucy is a genius, and Nicole is average. It's unbelievable, our own child. I can hardly sleep worrying about Nicole's exams. Indeed. It'll be a shame for our family if she fails. We'll have to think about it then. How can parents say such terrible things about their daughter? It's like they've forgotten I live with them. As anger and anxiety grew within me, I still had no choice but to face the opposition and try to do what I wanted as a high school student. Finally, the day of the exam arrived. As I was preparing my entrance ticket in the morning, Lucy appeared in my room. "Nicole, your life depends on today's exam, you know that," she said. "I know. Don't put more pressure on me. I'm saying this for your own good, you hopeless case. I've been working hard. I don't need you to tell me that." As the exam day tension was high, Lucy's undue pressure was profoundly annoying. My raised voice attracted even our parents to my room. My father opened his mouth with a look of disdain. "Hey, what are you yelling about this early? Do you understand today is the most important day of your life?" But Lucy said. "Are you blaming your poor performance on Lucy?" "No, that's not it. Let me remind you, if you fail the exam, you're out of this house." "What?" Shocked, I couldn't find the words. As I stood there bewildered, my mother gleefully added, "What's with that what? It's obvious, isn't it? We don't need a fool who can't become a doctor." "But, Mom, I can't survive if you kick me out now. You're 18, right? You're an adult now, so it'll be fine. If you fail, just get a job and do your best." That's. I was constantly berated by my family until I left the house. Incompetent, disappointment, no chance of passing, they said. And my mental state was nearing its limit. Even at the examination venue, my nervousness didn't subside. And my mental state during the exam was terrible. Surprisingly, I felt no confidence in my answers. 2 weeks later, on the day the results were announced, I accessed the university's website at exactly 10 a.m. Due to many people accessing at once, it was hard to connect to the results page. "Please, show me the results quickly. I don't care if it's a fail, I just want to escape this pressure." As my family impatiently asked, "Isn't it ready yet?" the website finally loaded. After comparing my exam number, I couldn't find it. No matter how many times I checked, my number wasn't there. As my parents sighed deeply, Lucy's laughter echoed through the room. Silent, I couldn't utter a word as my father slowly spoke. "Nicole, how much more do you intend to embarrass me?" "Dad. A doctor and a nurse's daughter failing medical school. Utterly useless. But Quiet. If you can't become a doctor, you're worthless. Get out." My father's face was like a demon's, his cheeks flushed with excitement. I sought help from my mother, but she wouldn't even meet my eyes. That's when my sister, Lucy, delivered the final blow. "You're just trash, aren't you?" "Lucy. But I've really been trying hard," I protested. "Excuses don't matter. You failed to get into medical school, and that's all there is to it. Just failing means you have no place in this house. That's people like you, who are useless. I'd rather you leave before you embarrass me and our parents, okay?" Bombarded with heartless words from my own family, I felt more numbness than sadness. I couldn't even cry anymore. All I could do was feel the reality of being abandoned by my family. The next day, my father thrust a pledge at me. It stated, "Never involve yourself with this family again." Without allowing me to speak, my parents demanded that I sign. Of course, I couldn't refuse, and I signed the pledge. Why did it come to this? I had tried so desperately. But no matter how hard I tried, without a medical school acceptance, it meant nothing. My parents only wanted me to become a doctor. My sister, who easily met our parents' expectations, was loved, and I was disowned just like that. A week later, I was thrown out of the house. Dragging a carry-on suitcase with no destination, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Jenny, my father's sister. As soon as I answered, I heard her cheerful voice. "Long time no see, Nicole. How did the exams go?" "Aunt Jenny, I didn't pass the medical school entrance exam." "Medical school? Weren't you always interested in drawing, Nicole?" "Yes. But my parents forced me to try for medical school. And since I failed, they kicked me out of the house." "What? Kicked out? So where are you now?" "I'm on my way to the station. I have nowhere to go." After hearing my situation, Jenny paused before saying, "Why don't you come stay with me?" "Really? Can I?" "Of course. We don't have kids, and it would be lovely to have you here." "Aunt Jenny. Thank you." So I started staying at my aunt's house from that day. Although I hadn't decided on a path forward, having a destination made my steps lighter. I explained everything to Jenny and her husband upon arriving at their house. After listening, they suggested that I attend a vocational school. "Nicole, you love drawing, right? Isn't that what you wanted to pursue?" "Yes, I've always wanted to be an illustrator, but..." "I know. You never really had a choice, did you? But now you're free to do as you like. We'll provide the money." "Aunt Jenny, you don't have to live by what your parents dictate. You should pursue what you want with all your heart." Grateful for my aunt's generosity, I decided to go to vocational school. Finally, I felt a step closer to my dream. Years later, my dream of becoming an illustrator came true. And I began working freelance. I started with small paid requests on social media. And eventually, companies began approaching me. Recently, I've been tasked with character design for a smartphone game. And my name has become more recognized. My illustrated books have been well received, and my income has steadily increased. One day, about 7 years later, I received a call from my father. It wasn't a pleasant feeling, but I couldn't ignore it. Hello? Nicole? You're working now, aren't you? What's with the sudden call? So what if I am? I need money. Pay back the money. Pay back. I don't remember borrowing any money from you. It's the child support I spent on raising you until you were 18. I'll let you off with $200,000. Prepare it within a month. Got it. Before I could respond, my father hung up abruptly. Confused, I told Aunt Jenny about the situation, and she said, "Don't worry about it." Still, I wondered why my father suddenly demanded money. He's a doctor, he shouldn't be struggling financially. Why all of a sudden? Could there be some reason he needs money from me? So, I searched online for information about my father's hospital. The moment I saw what was happening, a vengeful spirit awakened within me. I see, that's what's going on. Then I'll make sure to give them a taste of their own medicine. Determined for revenge, I decided to visit my parents' home over the weekend. Seeing me for the first time in years, my parents immediately started shouting. "Hey Nicole, you brought the money, right? We're letting you off with $200,000. You're paying it all at once, right?" To that, I confronted them. "What are you talking about? First of all, why should I pay $200,000? What? It's the money it cost to raise you. Yes. We provided you with a carefree home for 18 years, so listen to your parents. Provided for me. Parents are supposed to support their children, it's their duty." My words made my parents' faces turn red, and they began to tremble. I relentlessly continued. "And after all the comparisons to my sister and the terrible treatment, you think I felt like I had a carefree home? Don't be ridiculous. We paid for your tutoring and gave you a good life. That's right. Everything would have been fine if you had just passed the medical school entrance exam. What does that have to do with your hospital going out of business?" At that, my parents' expressions froze. As if they couldn't believe I knew, they looked utterly shocked. "Dad, what's with that face? It's hilarious. Hey, Nicole, how do you know about the hospital? If you suddenly say, 'Return the money,' of course, I'd think something was off. So, I looked up your hospital online. Then I saw it had closed down and I couldn't help but laugh." "No. That couldn't be helped," my father protested. "Couldn't be helped? But there were so many bad reviews, right? The doctor's attitude is terrible, quack doctor. The director and his wife look down on patients. Why would you know all that?" I knew the hospital management was deteriorating even before I left home. It was inevitable. A hospital run by people who always look down on others and think academic credentials are everything was bound to fail. That attitude continued, the number of patients rapidly decreased. And a few months ago, the hospital finally closed. Apparently, to keep the hospital running, my parents had incurred a lot of debt. When they could no longer manage, they turned to me for help. There was another problem in this house, my sister Lucy. I threw a sarcastic remark at my father, loud enough for my sister to hear. "The sister you had such high hopes for is now a splendid shut-in, right? Really, sorry for you." "Why, how could you know that?" "Because sister, you're using your real name on social media. You used to post all sorts of nasty things about me. Now it's just a nerdy account, right? A nerdy account. Posts like I dropped out of college, my crush in the smartphone game. Alex is the strongest, this month I'll borrow more money to spend on Alex. You just tweet stupid things like that, right? And all under your real name. It seems that even after Lucy dropped out of university, my parents continued to pamper her. As a result, she became a hopeless shut-in, borrowing money to spend on smartphone games. Then, Lucy, with fire in her eyes, came up to me and grabbed my collar, raising her voice. Hey! Did you just say I only tweet stupid things? It's the truth, isn't it? Got a problem with that? I have every problem with that. I'm dedicating my life to Alex. You wouldn't understand, would you? I do understand. I'm Alex's parent, after all. Parent? What are you talking about? Alex is a character in a smartphone game. He doesn't have parents. That's what I mean. I'm Alex's creator. What? Yes, the moment I saw my sister's social media account, I burst out laughing because the character she's currently obsessed with is one that I designed. To think that the sister who used to mock me so much is now pouring several thousands of dollars into a character I created. Just thinking about it made me feel victorious. Upon learning everything, my sister collapsed to her knees, turning pale, and muttered, I've been spending money on this girl's drawings. Sorry about your luck, sister. Ignoring my sister, my parents changed their tune. They grabbed my hands, their voices dripping with ingratiation. Amazing, Nicole. We had no idea you had such talent. Nicole was always the better child. We never expected such a filial ending. Filial? Come back to this house and support us, Nicole. I'm so happy we can live with Nicole again. Please start paying off our debts, even little by little. Do they still think I'm some kind of robot who does everything they say? I have no intention of obeying my parents anymore. I coldly dropped the truth on my joyful parents. What are you talking about? There's no way I'd help you after all the abuse and kicking me out of the house. How dare you say such things so lightly? Wait, please. It's not like that, Nicole. That's right. We've always cared about you. Don't mess with me. You just want to use me for money now that I'm successful. I'm not going to be controlled by such trashy parents anymore. The hospital closure and the way sister turned out, it's all your own doing. Suffer for all I care. Go to hell, all of you. I ignored my staggering parents and forcefully shut the front door. Later, I heard from my aunt that my parents had declared bankruptcy. They had sold the house and all their possessions. But it wasn't enough to cover their debts, and bankruptcy was the only option left. Until the end, they were looking for me, but thanks to my aunt hiding me, they couldn't find my whereabouts. I can't thank my aunt enough. Everything I have now is thanks to her. Aunt Jenny, thank you so much. It's fine. I'm really happy that Nicole can work doing what she loves. I'm grateful to you, Aunt. Thank you for taking me in back then. Hee, thanks to Nicole, I'm happy too. My aunt and I smiled at each other. Maybe I'll get married if I meet the right person in the future. Until then, I want to repay my aunt as much as I can. The funeral has already started and it's time to say goodbye to my mom. Where are you right now? Days have passed without contact from my husband. His voice over the phone sounded cheerful amidst the noisy background. You'll be surprised. I'm in Cancun celebrating my birthday with my parents. Can you hear the waves? Stunned by his insensitive words, I immediately retorted angrily. Mom has passed away. Don't you guys have any human decency? Tears welled up as I shouted into the phone. At that moment, my father tapped my shoulder. Did you get in touch with your husband? As I explained the situation to my father, his face grew increasingly filled with anger. Unable to tolerate my husband's outrageous behavior, my father raised his voice. I understand now. All right, everyone. Back to work from tomorrow. Get ready tonight. He loudly announced this to his subordinates at the funeral, who energetically responded. Yes. Meanwhile, my husband and his parents were probably enjoying dinner in Cancun, oblivious and unconcerned about returning anytime soon. Imagining them getting angry, I smirked. My name is Julia. I grew up in a family of 3 with my father and mother. I had everything I needed and never lacked food, so I lived comfortably. However, during that time, I harbored feelings of discontent. My father, always focused on his work, hardly paid any attention to his family. He had worked at construction sites for many years, always coming home sweaty and dirty, which I found very unpleasant during my sensitive years. Sometimes, friends would ask me what my father did for a living, while other children could proudly speak of their parents being civil servants or doctors. I could not boast about my father. This led me to vow never to become like him. And I studied hard during my school years, eventually becoming the top student. However, my rebellious spirit drove my studies, and I had not given much thought to my future career. When my father once asked me if I was considering my future, I rebelled against him and ended up not pursuing further education, opting instead to work for a temp agency. Life as a working adult was not as easy as I had anticipated, fueled only by my defiance. It was then that I first realized that my father's advice had been right all along, and I appreciated the nobility of long-term employment. Eventually, I reconciled with my father. Perhaps due to this change in my mindset, I met Matt, a full-time employee at a major corporation, and soon we got married. He was an elite graduate from an Ivy League university. But because I was only a high school graduate, my in-laws did not think highly of me. Nevertheless, supported by my strong-willed character which my husband admired, and my desire to settle down quickly, our relationship remained stable. Despite my wishes for a lavish wedding, we had a modest ceremony at a friend's venue, out of respect for my husband's preference for simplicity. Years passed, and we were both in our 30s. I had quit the temp job and was now working from home. One day, my husband came home looking unusually happy, so I asked him about it. I've been thinking about buying a new house for my parents soon. Watching him loosen his tie with a smile, I sensed that he had been influenced by his parents. While I loved my husband and he wasn't a bad person, it was apparent that he was somewhat dependent on his parents. His parents, too, doted on their son, always boasting about him being an elite employee at a major company. I suspected that his decision to buy the house was swayed by them. I've already found a plot of land. It's in a nice area on the outskirts of town. I'm thinking of building a big house there for the 4 of us to live in. I couldn't ignore what he just said. Wait a minute. Are you talking about living together? You decided this without consulting me? And what about the costs? It's okay. I discussed it with my parents, and they were very happy. I've thought about the costs and everything else. My husband was not listening to me. Convincing my in-laws seemed nearly impossible as they still held prejudices against me. And it was clear that they had driven the decision to buy the house. Furthermore, when I accompanied my husband to inform his parents about the construction schedule, he ended up revealing my displeasure with not being consulted about the house. Really, what are you thinking? Matt is the breadwinner, so there's no need to consult you. That's right. You just need to obey him. Anyway, to think that Matt is buying us a house, what a dutiful son. After being subjected to their sarcasm, I could say nothing in return and could only silently watch how things unfolded. Months later, the house that was a dream for my husband and his parents, but a nightmare for me, was built. Even after we started living with my in-laws, I continued my work from home. My husband was often absent due to work, and I used the computer in our bedroom for my job. However, my mother-in-law had no understanding of working from home. People from her generation probably don't grasp the concept of working from home. But that wasn't the end of it. She had always been harsh to me and began spreading rumors about me in the neighborhood. Our daughter-in-law just lazes around in her room all day. What a problem. Our son Matt is truly splendid, but his only mistake was choosing the wrong wife. Hearing such things about me spread daily was unbearable. I had things I wanted to say to my mother-in-law as well. And similarly, my father-in-law harassed me. A wife should devote herself to her husband once she's in the house. But she seems to be just making her own pocket money. Really, she's an unpleasant wife. Despite everything, I chose to endure their direct insults and bad-mouthing without talking back. I knew it was futile to discuss anything with my husband, who was still dependent on his parents. Living in this nightmarish house was painful, but I firmly believed that one day the tides would change. Yet reality was cruel, and my situation only worsened day by day. One evening, the three of them went out together and didn't come back for a long time. I always prepared dinner, and my mother-in-law always criticized the taste. And that day I had finished preparing and was waiting for their return. Worried by their unusual lateness, I called my husband, who said something unbelievable on the phone. I'm eating pizza with the family right now. You know, that popular pizzeria we saw on TV. So don't worry if we're late coming home. I couldn't believe his nerve as he laughed while speaking. He said he was eating pizza with the family, which seemed to imply that I was not considered part of the family. And soon, this suspicion was confirmed when they returned home. My husband first asked me, "Did you want to eat too?" Followed by my mother-in-law's sarcasm. "Don't be selfish, you're just a maid who does nothing." And my father-in-law's command, "Clean up quickly." While cleaning up the dinner they had dismissed, I, known for my strong will, finally reached my breaking point, and that night I cried alone in the bedroom. Yet, more hardships awaited me as my mother became bedridden due to illness. "I'm sorry, Julia. I know it's sudden, but we need you to come back. Ever since I was a child, Dad has been busy with work. And now I've taken over caring for Mom. It's okay. I owe it to you, and I understand your job is tough. I'm not the same person I used to be. I appreciate you saying that. Having overcome past rebellions, I now strive to understand Dad's work better than anyone. Mom never spoke ill of Dad even when I was against him. And even now, bedridden, she continues to believe in him. In honor of her feelings, I wanted Dad to be able to focus on his work. Yet, my in-laws continued to bombard me with cruel words. Really, Matt has become so successful, and you can't even support him. Preferring your mother? Such a disappointing wife. A housewife who can't even manage the housework properly. Typical for the daughter of a poor carpenter, low-educated and so uncouth. A woman should devote herself to her husband for life. These were the harsh words I faced upon returning home. Exhausted from alternating care for my mother after waiting for Dad to finish work. But what I couldn't endure was my husband's words. Do you know why we didn't have a lavish wedding? Imagine introducing a carpenter's daughter to relatives and my boss. It would embarrass me. You just need to work as I say. You're nothing more than a strong-willed woman. I deeply regretted why I ever married such a heartless man. In my eagerness not to miss out on marriage, I foolishly nodded to someone who showed interest without much thought. Moreover, my husband didn't understand his own position and was just showing off to his parents, forever dependent on them. Knowing this but unable to do anything about it, I had become far from the strong person I once was, merely enduring insults from those three and crying helplessly. Will there ever come a day when the tide turns? It was hard to imagine as the tough days continued. 6 months later, despite all the treatment and my desperate care, Mom passed away. Dad and I solemnly proceeded with the funeral preparations. Dad had been busy with work when Mom was sick. But he tried to lighten my burden as much as possible, which I felt deeply. His efforts seemed like regrets for his previous neglect and an attempt at redemption. I never mentioned it, but enduring the harassment from those three, Dad's efforts were the only encouragement for me. But those three were relentless in tormenting me. They had been unreachable since the day before the funeral. Dad seemed irritated by their rudeness, but he was too busy with funeral preparations to dwell on it. We finally got hold of my husband just in time for the priest to arrive on the day of the funeral. What have you been doing? The funeral is starting, and it's time to say goodbye to my mom. Where are you? In response to my desperate plea, my husband's voice sounded cheerful over the phone, amid noisy sounds. You'll be surprised. I'm in Cancun celebrating my birthday with my parents. Can you hear the waves? We're happily sunbathing on the beach. I was momentarily stunned by his utterly insensitive words, and immediately exploded in anger. What are you thinking? Mom has passed away. Don't you have any compassion? As I ranted, tears streaming down, a hand gently patted my shoulder. What's wrong? Did you get a hold of your husband? As I turned around, Dad initially looked surprised but became increasingly angry as I explained the situation. I understand. All right, everyone. Work resumes tomorrow. Get ready tonight. After announcing this to his subordinates at the funeral, who responded energetically with a yes. The day after the funeral, I stood in front of the detestable house my husband had built for his parents. They were probably still enjoying dinner in Cancun, oblivious and unconcerned about returning anytime soon. If I were to act, it had to be now. I gazed deeply at the hollow sandcastle my husband had built, imagining the scene that would make those angry. Then, as I saw several large trucks approaching, I smirked, realizing the time had come. Ready, Julia? As Dad stepped down from the lead truck, I quietly nodded. The many subordinates from the other trucks lined up in front of him. All right, everyone. Follow the plan. Let's tear down that house. Go. At Dad's command, the subordinates shouted yes and swarmed into the house, packing everything into the trucks, emptying the house completely. Well done, everyone. We might need to start a moving company too, Dad joked, eliciting laughter from his team. Let's start the real work now. Again, at Dad's command, the subordinates readied the dump trucks and bulldozers. Leave this to me. Dad then climbed into the bulldozer and began demolishing the house without hesitation. In the quiet suburban area, there were no neighbors to intervene. And Dad's handling of the bulldozer was so skilled it seemed as though he was merely dismantling a castle of sand. The suburban mansion that my husband had so proudly boasted about was completely demolished by Dad, leaving nothing but bare land. Well done, everyone. After we leave here, get back to regular work. I thanked the subordinates, who all expressed their joy at being able to help the boss and their happiness at being useful. I truly felt proud of Dad. Despite my youthful rebellion against his focus on work, seeing him respected and loved by his subordinates, I realized everything he had done was right. And it was for this that Mom had believed in him. Thank you, Dad, truly. With heartfelt gratitude, I thanked Dad. After that, I ended up living with Dad in our family home. A week after turning that house into bare land, those three furiously stormed in. Julia. What the hell is this? Where's the house? We came back and screamed, what is this? Where did you put the house? As my husband ranted in panic on our doorstep, I coolly responded, welcome back. Did you enjoy Cancun? I've put that land up for sale. And since you left me behind, I at least expected some souvenirs, right? My attitude infuriated my husband, who turned bright red with anger. Don't mess with me. Do you even realize what you've done? You're just holding a grudge because we didn't attend your mother's funeral, aren't you? Well, if you know that, at least go and see my mother's grave. Shut up. This isn't over. Right, Mom and Dad? Despite my in-laws glaring at me fiercely and agreeing with my husband, I had no intention of backing down. Ah, everyone, it's been a while, hasn't it? I believe the last time was at Julia's wedding. Please, come in. It's awkward to have a discussion standing here. My father stood by my side with an unconcerned expression. You. How dare you say such things so brazenly? What you did is a clear crime. That's right. We have the police waiting outside right now. You'll pay dearly for destroying someone else's property. My in-laws said this and called the police from the patrol car outside. But neither my father nor I were intimidated. Oh. The police? That's actually convenient for us, right, Julia? Matching my father's smug expression, I nodded. Yes, it will quickly become clear who the real villains are. This might actually make things easier for us. Our calmness seemed to momentarily unnerve all three of them. However, it seems a bit unfair that only you call for backup. So, we'll make our own call. To a real estate agent. My father said this and made a call. Calling a real estate agent won't change the fact that you destroyed our house. While my in-laws ranted, I didn't miss the embarrassed look on my husband's face. He might be regretting his emotional actions upon arrival. But I thought it was too late, emerking. As the real estate agent arrived, the harsh reality my husband feared was laid bare. Yes, the house of my in-laws was originally purchased in my father's name. And he had paid for everything from the land to the construction costs. It was even him that practically built the house. No way. Matt, is that true? You told us you bought us the house. Matt, you said your father-in-law was just a poor carpenter. Their earlier momentum was gone, and my in-laws were now completely flustered. My husband could only hang his head in silence. Well, our company isn't that big yet. What Matt said wasn't entirely wrong. Perhaps I should hand out my business card. Receiving the card, my in-laws were dumbfounded. Though my father was modest, he was actually the president of one of the largest construction companies in the country. So their surprise was understandable. Despite understanding his own situation, my husband had shamelessly relied on my father to build that house to maintain appearances in front of his parents. No, that can't be true. Anyone can make a fake business card. You're lying. It must be a fake career history. That's right. The house was bought by our elite son, Matt. As my in-laws stubbornly clung to their belief, my husband remained silent, his face downcast. I decided to deliver the final blow without hesitation. Oh dear, you've been so quiet, like it's your funeral. It's a pity you weren't like this at my mother's funeral. My husband, unable to respond, just clenched his fists. Well, I guess you can't say it yourself. Shall I explain for you? As I spoke, my husband looked up, his voice trembling. Not that, please. Unfortunately, it seems the false career is your son's, not my father. My in-laws gasped in shock. Yes, the successful career path they believed their son had was all a lie. Soon after marrying me, my husband had angered a client due to his own mistake, which led to him being sidelined at work, and his salary was significantly cut. I started working from home because his income alone couldn't support us. Despite this, to save face for him, I never told his parents about our situation. Yet, he continued to indulge in luxuries like eating out at expensive restaurants to impress them, with all the bills being paid by me. By the way, it was your birthday a few days ago, wasn't it? Happy birthday. Here's a present for you. Saying this, I thrust this month's credit card bill at him. Even after hearing all this, my in-laws, still unwilling to believe the story, pressured Matt. All that talk just now was made up, right? But Matt, completely drained of life, didn't respond, leaving them no choice but to slump their shoulders in defeat. However, my story wasn't finished. Now it was time to deliver the final blow to my in-laws. And I unleashed everything I had been holding back while enduring their constant jibes. I saw you walking with a woman I don't know. Curious, I followed you, and it turns out she's the hostess of his favorite bar. You seemed quite smitten with her. No. I mean, that's not. My father-in-law's face turned pale, and his eyes darted around. Just the other day, I saw the two of you leaving a fancy jewelry store arm in arm. I wonder how much you've spent on her so far. With no way to respond after being exposed, my father-in-law could only look down and mutter, "I'm sorry. Honey. To sneak around behind my back like that. I'm so disappointed in you." My mother-in-law started to accuse him, showing off her own weakness. And you've been going to a nightclub almost every night. You slip out after your husband falls asleep from drinking at home. I know about your nightly outings. What? You saw that. My mother-in-law turned bright red, as if she wished she could disappear. And you? What have you been doing behind my back? Now it was my father-in-law's turn to accuse. But such a foolish quarrel between them was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It escalated into a physical fight and ended up being broken up by the very police officers they had brought along. After giving all three of them a thorough dressing down, I thought it was about time for them to leave this house. Turning to my exhausted husband, I said bluntly, "I don't know how much you spent in Cancun with that happy face of yours. But from now on, not a single penny from my earnings will go towards it." Wait, Without your earnings, there's no way I can cover everything with my salary alone. My husband said weakly, then crouched down, holding his head. You all have too little respect for our jobs. You never tried to understand my work from home, treating me like a mere housekeeper. And you underestimated my father's work too. You got what you deserved. Serves you right. I spat these words out and then told the police officer. Please, take these three away quickly. They resisted and struggled. But ultimately the officers, somewhat scolding them, led them away. I might be one of those people though, since I used to make fun of my father's work. As I watched the police car carrying the three of them drive away, I said to my father standing beside me, "But, Dad, you looked so cool driving that bulldozer." At my words, my father smiled shyly. After that, I demanded a divorce from my husband, but he refused, pitifully claiming he couldn't live without me, so the matter went to mediation. Thanks to my father's company's highly reputed lawyers, I felt secure handing it over. But my husband, having squandered everything in Cancun, couldn't even afford a lawyer. As a result, the mediation overwhelmingly favored my side, and I was finally able to divorce. While property division was discussed, I decided not to pursue it, knowing he had no means to pay, on the condition he never contact me again. Thus, the three of them, with the house now a bare lot, had to move to public housing. With my ex-husband's diminished income, there was no way they could survive without his parents finding work. Meanwhile, my remote work caught the attention of a major corporation, and I was offered a full-time position with excellent benefits. My father praised my work, and we both came to truly respect each other's professions. It's gotten late because work dragged on. I should head home soon. It was late at night and I was walking home quickly. Walking alone on a deserted street at night is dangerous. I need to get home quickly. Just as I was thinking this, a dull pain suddenly struck my back. As I fell, I managed to catch a glimpse of the perpetrator, a woman holding a metal bat and glaring at me. Despite the darkness, her flashy attire was unmistakable. I had been wary of strange men, never expecting to be attacked by a woman. I was shocked. Being Ethan's wife is unforgivable. The one who truly loves Ethan is me. Ethan belongs to me. You should just disappear. While calling out my husband's name, the woman beat me mercilessly with the metal bat. I thought, what does that mean? I wanted to ask her many things, but repeated blows prevented me from even raising my voice. I fell to the ground in pain, my consciousness fading. When I regained consciousness, the woman was gone, and dawn had broken while I lay on the ground. As I stood up, intense pain coursed through my body. Blood dripped onto the ground. Holding my head in pain, my palm came away covered in blood. I realized I was bleeding from the head. I could smell the iron. I tried to call an ambulance with my smartphone, but unfortunately, the battery was dead. I thought, why now of all times? Looking around, I could see the law office where my husband, Ethan, worked. Despite trembling and staggering, I desperately dragged myself towards the law office. Fortunately, it was already open. Ethan must be there by now. I thought, that woman, she'll see what it means to mess with a lawyer's wife. With my husband's power, I'll make sure that woman gets what she deserves. If it's true that she and Ethan were in love, I'll confront Ethan looking like this. With that thought, I pushed myself to keep going. Finally, I stepped into the office. The lawyer who greeted me was shocked at the sight. No wonder I was covered in blood. Call lawyer number 3189, my husband. I relayed the number Ethan had given me. You might want to call an ambulance. Just do it. Lawyer number 3189. I snapped, out of patience. The lawyer, looking confused, said, "There's no such registered lawyer." What, really? That couldn't be. Ethan definitely works at this law office. I've seen him going to work here. Yes. Besides, lawyer registration numbers now have 5 digits, not 4. Only lawyers registered over 50 years ago have a 4-digit registration number. That would mean they're quite elderly. Of course, Ethan isn't that old. He's still in his 30s. Even those registered over 50 years ago wouldn't have that number. The smallest number from the first training session in 1947 is 5251. No. I'm sure, that's what my husband told me. That can't be. Suddenly, my vision swayed and I collapsed again. I couldn't believe any of it. Was Ethan not really a lawyer? That can't be. My in-laws were proud of their lawyer son. I've seen his lawyer badge. He seemed to know quite a bit about the law. Maybe Ethan had mistakenly told me his lawyer number. Could that be? He had repeated 3189 so many times. With my head bleeding from the beating, coherent thought was impossible. My vision blurred. Are you all right? I'm calling an ambulance right now. Hello. I heard the lawyer calling for help as my consciousness drifted away. My name is Aaron Powell. My husband, Ethan Powell, is a lawyer. At least, that's what he has claimed since we met. We met on a dating app and quickly progressed to marriage. My friends envy me for having a lawyer husband, but I think it's awful. I'm a lawyer, you know. Are you going against me? He would say this arrogantly whenever he disliked something. He used to be so kind before we got married. He would often talk at length about how hard he worked to become the lawyer his parents wanted. But being a lawyer means you're making good money, right? People would say. But until recently, Ethan wasn't earning much. His income was almost like a janitor's. Apparently, he didn't have many clients. Being a lawyer wasn't as great as it seemed. Our marital relationship was not good, dominated by his arrogance. I was already regretting marrying Ethan. One day, Ethan started using social media as a handsome lawyer. He was quite good-looking. With his sharp rhetoric, he discussed legal issues, gender politics, and political correctness debates, quickly gaining followers. Though it seemed he was only echoing the majority opinion online, it appeared to be effective. Thanks to social media, Ethan's client base seemed to increase. His income improved. As work went well and his income increased, Ethan became kinder to me. And then, this happened. Now, I'm hospitalized and lying in a hospital bed. Of course, I got a medical report. It seems Ethan was informed. He messaged me saying, "I heard you were suddenly attacked by a woman on the street at night. Tough break." I reported it to the police, and I felt relieved. Yet, Ethan hasn't visited me even once. Not a single message showing concern. Even when I send him messages on Messenger, I only get stickers or he leaves me on read. It's shocking, even if our marriage is strained. I thought, is he having a good time with that mistress right now? Lying alone in bed, I can't help but think about it. I want to believe that Ethan is worried about me. The one who truly loves Ethan is me. Ethan belongs to me. From that phrase, I think that woman must have been Ethan's mistress. I had been suspecting Ethan of cheating due to his recent strange behavior. It seems I was right about Ethan. I finally came home from the hospital and was able to face Ethan. Although the hospital advised me to stay longer, I had things I needed to verify and couldn't stand waiting any longer. Why didn't you visit me even once? You didn't even send me a message to check if I was okay. I was suddenly attacked on the street. As I confronted him, Ethan just gave a wry smile and said, Sorry. I was busy with work. You know, being a lawyer is a hectic job. Are you angry? Well, I'll buy you a cake to celebrate your discharge then. He tried to lighten the mood without showing any real concern. Even though I was still bandaged up. He didn't show any anger towards the person who attacked me either. Hey, aren't you angry at the person who did this to me? Of course I'm angry. But you weren't seriously harmed, so isn't that good enough? It was dangerous. Can't you use your lawyer's power to punish the perpetrator? What do you think a lawyer is? I can't just dish out punishments like in some satisfying drama. Leave it to the police. Maybe, but don't you care about me? I do care. But worrying won't heal your injuries. I wanted to ask Ethan about not being registered at the law office and his non-existent lawyer number, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Determined to uncover the truth, I went to the law firm where Ethan claimed to work. The first person to greet me was the lawyer who had called the ambulance for me. How are your injuries? While my husband hadn't shown any concern, this person did. Yes, thank you, I'm getting better. I'm glad to hear that. I was worried. No, I should apologize for the trouble last time. Really, thank you so much. How can I ever repay you? Here, this is a small gift. I hope you like it. Thank you, I'm really grateful. I apologize for the late introduction. My name is Matt Owen. Lawyer Owen said as he handed me his business card. His cleanliness and polite demeanor gave me a good impression. Thank you. My name is Aaron Powell. To get to the point, is my husband, Ethan Powell, really not a lawyer here? I heard he worked here. He even has a social media presence. Ethan Powell. Lawyer Owen, with a puzzled look, repeated the name I mentioned. And then turned pale the moment he saw Ethan's account on my smartphone. This man. Do you know something? Excuse me. Ma'am, this person does indeed work at this law office. For a moment, I thought maybe the lawyer number was just a mistake until Lawyer Owen continued. However, he is not a lawyer. He's a janitor at this law firm. What? A janitor. But he had a lawyer badge. He might have forged it, or maybe he found a badge that another lawyer lost. It's surprisingly common for them to lose things. Or perhaps he stole it. Anyway, thank you for telling me. Speaking as a lawyer, pretending to be one is a violation of the law and a crime. So, I'm sorry, but we can't overlook this and we will have to report it. Lawyer Owen looked apologetic as he spoke. Please wait. I don't mind the report, but actually, I've hired a detective agency to investigate if he's cheating on me. I was attacked by a woman who seems to be his mistress. So could you wait until the results come in? I'll report back as soon as I get them. Lawyer Owen seemed thoughtful. Understood. I specialize in divorce law. So if it comes to that with your husband, I'd be willing to help. Thank you for everything. I thanked him deeply, and Lawyer Owen nodded in return. The detective's results came quickly. As expected, Ethan was having an affair with that woman. During my hospitalization, it seems he had even let her stay at our house. Moreover, they had conversations like, "I found that woman on the street at night and beat her up with a metal bat. Now no one will interfere with me and Ethan. Hey, don't go too far. What if you get caught? Such a bad woman. And well, it's easier without the nagging ugly wife." The mistress had hurriedly left the house when I returned home sooner than expected. However, the police investigation revealed even more shocking details. Ethan was indeed a fake lawyer. And the lawyer badge he had was one he found dropped in the office. Initially, he had only pretended to be a lawyer to impress others. But eventually, Ethan started engaging in fraudulent activities. Pretending to be a lawyer, he would get people to pay him retainer fees. Starting a social media was also part of his fraud scheme, luring victims. Engaging in debates about gender issues, politics, and political correctness online was just him getting carried away by internet arguments. But it also helped him in gathering victims. The reason for the increase in Ethan's income was, needless to say, due to the money transferred for his scams. I was happily oblivious, pleased that his income had increased and that he had become kinder. The mistress was also one of the victims deceived by him, entering into the relationship to potentially benefit from his influence. And as a result, she had been financially supporting Ethan lavishly. Lawyer Owen and I reported Ethan and his mistress to the police. It turned out that Ethan's claim of having reported my assault was a lie. He knew his mistress was the assailant and lied about reporting it to protect her. Ethan was arrested for violating lawyer regulations and fraud, and his mistress for assault. The metal bat used in the attack was seized, and my blood was collected from it. Ethan ranted, "I gave you a good life with the money I made. Don't report your husband just because you're jealous he cheated. Ungrateful wife. You bring such misfortune." It was complete resentment. I did not want any part of the money he earned through fraud. And it was only a matter of time before he would have been caught anyway. Naturally, I divorced Ethan and demanded compensation for adultery and assault from both him and his mistress. During this, Lawyer Owen was a great support. Thanks to him, I was able to secure far more in damages than usual. Likely because the case involved both assault and fraud. The mistress claimed I was a victim of the fraud too. "Yet, you're not only reporting me but also taking compensation. That's cruel. I've already been swindled out of a lot of money by Ethan, and now I have none. Because of this, I've even been disowned by my family. Everyone is terrible. I'm a victim here. It's the wife's fault for not stopping her husband's fraud. It's only natural I hit her." Indeed, she might have been a victim of the fraud. However, what is she talking about after having committed adultery and assault? She is clearly also an offender. I have no obligation to forgive her. Moreover, the case she asked Ethan to handle involved her stealing from an acquaintance's home, so she was fully culpable. And there was no room for sympathy. The mistress had asked Ethan to settle the case cheaply and minimize the damage. And Ethan continued the affair, using this as leverage to extort money from her. I recalled that recently, cosmetics and jewelry had frequently gone missing from my possessions. Especially right after I was discharged from the hospital, many items were lost. According to the police, it was indeed the mistress who had stolen them. With Ethan's acquiescence. Ethan apparently didn't care about my belongings. Despite having been caught stealing once, her bad habits had not changed, including the case she had asked Ethan to handle. The mistress was also charged with theft. Naturally, I also demanded compensation for these losses. Ethan said the wife wasn't using them anymore, so he gave them to me. I'm not at fault. Even the case where she hit the wife with a metal bat. Ethan told me to do it. He said the wife was in the way. Then he persuaded me that it would work out in my favor. I'm not at fault. I was deceived by a con artist. I'm a victim. Punish that con man, not me. She's lying. I didn't know anything about her belongings being stolen. If I had known, I would have stopped it. I didn't know anything about the wife being beaten either. It was all that woman's doing. Please punish her alone. Ethan and his mistress tried to shift the blame onto each other during the police interrogation. Both were desperately trying to lighten their own sentences. Ethan's parents also visited him in detention, where a shocking truth emerged. His parents had also been deceived by Ethan's claim of being a lawyer. They had pressured him from a young age to become a lawyer. Despite his efforts and studying hard, Ethan failed the bar exam. Not wanting to disappoint his parents, he lied about passing the bar after starting work as a janitor at a law firm. Initially, he intended to make the lie true by continuing to take the bar exam. But after failing 5 times, he was barred from retaking it unless he passed a preliminary examination or completed a law school program, which he did not want to pursue. Unable to confess the truth to his parents, who praised him as the pride of the family, and having found a lawyer's badge in the office, he decided to continue the deception. Thus, I was also deceived. His knowledge of the law came from studying for the exams. Some of his stories about his struggles to become a lawyer were partly true. With his arrest and the ensuing media coverage, Ethan's life smeared with lies came to an end. His face and name were widely published, effectively ending his social standing. His parents, who once praised their son as the pride of their family, berated him during the visit, calling him the shame of the family and saying, "Your misdeeds have become such big news, we can't face anyone. We're sorry to Aaron." They even apologized to me. "It's all our fault this happened. We're so sorry," they said, looking utterly exhausted. Ethan, disowned by his in-laws, sent me a letter asking for reconciliation, saying, "You're all I have left, I'll spend my life making it up to you, please don't leave me alone. I only used her to get what I wanted, and the only person I truly love is you." I immediately tore up the letter and didn't respond. His words meant nothing. If he truly loved me, why wasn't he worried when I was hospitalized after being attacked by his mistress? Why was he laughing with her about how good it was that the nagging, ugly wife was gone? He also wrote, "Are you divorcing me because I'm not a lawyer but a janitor? How terrible. Do you choose men based on their status? What is he misunderstanding? It's not about him not being a lawyer or being a janitor. The problem is that he pretended to be a lawyer, deceived everyone, betrayed me, and committed crimes. Now, Ethan has been dismissed from his job and isn't even a janitor anymore. No woman would choose a man with a status as a criminal." And then came the trial. The attack was so severe that, had lawyer Owen not called an ambulance, it might have been fatal, which led to the charge being elevated from assault to attempted murder. The question of whether his mistress had the intent to kill was rigorously investigated, despite her desperate claims that there was no intent to kill, and she only meant to hospitalize me. Her words during the attack, "You should just disappear," indicated murderous intent, leading to a severe sentence, even for a first offense. Ethan, too, received a heavy sentence due to the egregiousness of his actions. It's almost comforting to think of them both in prison, though they're in separate facilities for men and women. Even if they were together, they would likely blame each other and split up soon. After serving their sentences, they'll be saddled with debt from the damages and compensation they must pay, especially since Ethan's fraud convictions might prevent them from borrowing money from banks. Their lives will be tough. This incident caused quite a stir on social media. A self-proclaimed lawyer, who was actually a fraudster involved in an attempted murder case against his wife, had been active in political and gender debates, leading to a massive backlash when the truth came out. Ethan's name trended daily. Reflecting on everything, some people have come out saying they always thought the lawyer was too ignorant, and that they suspected him from the start. Especially those who had conflicting ideologies with Ethan, or those he had attacked, were quick to say "I told you so" and criticized his entire philosophy. Those who disliked this reaction attacked Ethan's critics, accusing them of getting carried away. Somehow, the case also evolved into a debate about gender. It turned into discussions of this is why men or women are their own worst enemies. Criticism led to more criticism, escalating into political and gender debates, making the situation increasingly heated. However, as the saying goes, a person's gossip lasts but 9 days. And soon, the uproar about Ethan began to subside. I, too, became a focal point throughout this event, and the attention wasn't always sympathetic. Fortunately, my family and coworkers were supportive, but there were those who harshly questioned, "Didn't you realize your husband wasn't really a lawyer? Were you only looking at his status? How did you not notice he was committing fraud? Were you complicit or just incompetent?" Some even accused me of being an accomplice, claiming I must have known and stayed silent. Anonymous people on internet news also freely posted their speculations. I wanted to shout, "You know nothing." Why should I, the victim, be subjected to such comments? Yet, the saying that a person's gossip lasts but 9 days holds true here too. And soon the strange looks and wild accusations around me died down. "You've been through a lot," said Lawyer Owen, who not only provided legal assistance but also supported me personally, always offering kind words. "Yes, but thanks to you, I received compensation and managed to overcome the trauma." "Thank you so much," I replied. "I'm glad." I was worried about how things would turn out. I really apologize for the trouble my husband caused. I'm also sorry for all the trouble I caused. Don't worry about it. You were the main victim, after all. Don't mind it. Thanks to you, we managed to deal with a criminal pretending to be a lawyer in our firm. If we hadn't noticed, he might have caused significant damage eventually. I'm glad it didn't come to that. If it's okay with you, could we perhaps keep in touch, not just as lawyer and client?" His face was red, and I felt my cheeks warm up too. "Yes, I'd like that, Matt. If you would." And so, I began dating Lawyer Owen. Matt. Even after the professional relationship as lawyer and client ended, he remained incredibly kind. I expected some criticism from society, but it seemed the public had lost interest in the incident, and no one said much about it. However, my friends teased me about how much I must love lawyers. It wasn't about his profession, though. Sure, I fell for him through his work helping me. But more than anything, it was his character that I fell for. Still, I'm indeed relieved that Matt is a real lawyer. After all, I've had enough of fake ones.